Please welcome Chrissy Farr, VentureBeat.
So I've got a great group with me. We have quite a broad theme for our panel today. We're talking about technology, optimization, and innovation. But I've got a great group who are going to give us some real stories and examples of how they have brought innovation to their companies, what's worked and also what hasn't. So I'm just going to let the panelists introduce themselves. And as it's already been mentioned, I'm Chrissy Farr. I am a writer for VentureBeat.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jason Blessing. I'm the CEO of Plex Systems. Our product is the Plex Manufacturing Cloud, which is the first ERP system purpose-built for the manufacturing enterprise. So happy to be here with you today.
And I'm Lanny Cohen, Global CTO of Capgemini. And if you don't know us, we're a global systems integrator, management consulting, and outsourcing company.
Hi, I'm Chris Moras. I'm a Chief Strategy Officer with Jive Software, and Jive does a social business platform for large enterprises connecting employees and customers and partners together.
Well, great. So we've got a great group, and let's just kind of kick things off with talking about how you foster a culture of innovation at a company, that is of your size, with hundreds of employees scattered across offices across the world. How do you ensure that bright ideas can actually kind of come up to the surface?
I guess I'll go ahead and start. So, if you look at the technology landscape, there are some companies that just seem to have great innovation in their DNA. But that said, I have never met a CEO or a leader in a tech company that says, we're innovative enough, it's good enough. So CEOs and leaders are always looking for ways to continue to plant seeds of innovation. I'll just tell you two quick kind of anecdotes of what's worked for me in the past. The first, at my last company, we actually had a group that was dedicated to innovation. We called it the Innovation Lab, and the whole idea was, pull a group of resources that are highly leverageable out of the tyranny of the immediate and allow them to focus on forward-thinking ideas. And the team was made up of a project manager, a designer, an architect, and a senior software engineer. And so these guys could take any idea, decompose it down into a project, and actually build a prototype to show the art of what was possible. It was very popular at the company, and then we took it to the next level and kind of ripped off. It was kind of, in the end, a rip-off of the Shark Tank and American Idol, where we put out a call to the entire company for ideas. And at the time, we were a company of 1,300 employees. 150 ideas came back. We winnowed it down to the top 20, the top 10, and then the top 3. And the top 3 ideas worked with the Innovation Lab to actually come up with a pitch and a prototype, and then pitched it to a subset of the executive team that were the judges, and we broadcast it around the world to all of our offices. And the thing I really liked about that approach is it really fostered innovation across the company. Everybody thinks the product guys are the ones responsible for innovation at a company, but this pulled the whole company in and got us wrapped around it. Also gave us an amazing repository of ideas.
And did you set aside structured time for employees to actually come up with these ideas, or were they largely doing it on their own time after work?
That's a great question, and we consciously didn't set aside time because we wanted people to self-organize and really own it and really lean into it.
Yeah, Chrissy, I think in our scenarios, I think we're 140,000 people worldwide, and what we learned and understood is that innovation is going on every day in the company. So our challenge was not so much, how do we go and innovate, is how do we capture so much of the innovation that's actually going on with our employees today, and how do we kind of stimulate and make it easy for them to share the innovations they're doing. And I think, culturally, the thing we had to get our arms wrapped around was a concept that we internally refer to as applied innovation. Our fear was if we were too much focused on 5, 10, 15 years out as a company, the inertia, the immune system of the company would just probably squash a lot of the innovation. So we had to put it in a context of how can we do innovation so that we can see a path to revenue and money, relatively soon. So as a result, I think between that orientation of applied innovation and then creating a network and the tools and the technologies where we could source all the ideas that were probably happening every day with some of the best clients in the world, That's kind of how we tackle the problem.
And do you, you know, as the global CTO, do you have sort of more of an open door policy? Is there a way for an entrepreneur within your organization to actually pitch their idea to you?
Yeah, so what we do, actually a couple of things. We have a whole network of innovation labs, kind of as Jason described, throughout the company. So that's a place where people can kind of see, feel, and touch, you know, innovation happening every day, and we encourage people to make use of that. But yes, a very, very open door policy where, you know, through the social tools that we have in the company, we do encourage people to just come directly to me and to others around the company and share their ideas.
Great, and just an idea, you know, you mentioned that you have social and collaboration tools that help people share ideas. I mean, here's Jive, and a great example of that. Within, you know, do you use your technology to sort of surface the thought leaders within the organization that you might not expect? It might be that intern that suggested an idea on Jive, and it's actually a great idea, and can you use that technology to find it?
We do. So we're smaller than the other panelists. So we're about 700 people globally. And we do. We're hyper users of the platform, and our culture really built up using it. So there's some unique characteristics, I think, in Jive from some of the customers we serve that are larger companies. But it's interesting to me when people talk about innovation, I really think of it in sort of 4 classes, right? I mean, there's people talk about innovation, and often they're talking about cultures that have grown to where they suppress ideas, right? Like new ideas just can't get to the light of day, and that's kind of the lowest part of Maslow's hierarchy, as it were, of like, you know, like there's plenty of great ideas, and getting them out is great. Sometimes they talk about innovation, they're just talking about doing new things in the company or changing a process or using common sense. The next one is you hear a lot of companies and they think of themselves as innovative because they'll say, well, what's the best thing we could do with what we have? Like the skills, the people, the things, and it is innovation. And then there's kind of this world-class innovation, sort of like Ray was talking about yesterday, where you start with the mission and the idea of what you want to do, and then you go out and seek the skills and the people and the talents and the perspective, and maybe they're in your company and maybe they're not, and you assemble that to do it. And it almost always involves integrating functions that don't normally want to come together, right? You were even describing like designers with engineers. Like, I mean, these are people who think differently, and I think for us, like we try, it's easier right now because we're smaller and we have sort of a sole focus mission, but because of that, we've had to acquire many companies because of the expertise they had, because we didn't have it internally. We sort of looked around and we're like, it's not there, it doesn't exist. We have lots of great ideas and we can't execute on it.
That's a really interesting point. You know, and Jive does a fair amount of M&A. You actually even acquired my roommate's company.
Right, we're out there.
Yeah, so really, really out there. But also, you know, when you bring in this fresh blood, these entrepreneurs into your organization, they might not be used to, you know, levels of bureaucracy and all this structure. And how do you kind of bring them in and ensure that they actually stay rather than just sort of chomp at the bit to run off again and start the next thing?
Yeah, well, you know, I mean, one, I think we're constantly learning, like most companies, on how to do this. I think it's something in the Valley now that's become important to learn how to do. And I think there's also an acceptance sometimes with these entrepreneurs that they will go off and start new companies again. And at best, you're kind of renting them for a few years. I think Google kind of pioneered this idea and we've embraced it. It's like, it's sort of the deal is like, we'd like you to work with us for a few years to help build in this kind of thinking and your expertise. And so we did that with a company called Proximal Labs because they had big data engineers and structures and also social scientists and data scientists, and we didn't have that. We did it with your roommate's company because they were doing cutting edge real-time communication stuff that was very different than what was being done before. We did it with another company who was able to kind of frack into the old Microsoft infrastructure because most of the engineers coming out of school now don't know how to like code inside of Outlook or something. And so, you know, and it's been great. And in some cases they've stayed, and in that case, the last one, the guy's running products now. He's an executive in the company, and that worked out. And in other cases, they move on, but we've kept a lot of the learning and the organizational structures that they brought in. And so in both those cases, I'd still view it as a success because they leave still happy with us and we leave happy with them, and I think it was worth the investment.
Interesting. So there are two kind of bigger examples that come to my mind of companies that are very known for sort of spearheading innovation. One of them is Google, and they have that famous 5%, you know, policy especially for engineers. And they, you know, you can go off and do your own projects. And the other one is Yahoo, and it's Marissa Mayer's whole kind of controversial idea of not having people work remotely. So I'm wondering what your take might be on those two ideas and whether or not you've thought about kind of modeling the kind of Google or Yahoo approach, and if not, why?
I'll take a cut at that. So Google's actually a big partner of ours, and so we've had a chance to kind of observe and see what they're doing, and we have started to model some of it. And I think what's unique and some of the big takeaways are, first, the importance of leadership and fostering innovation. I mean, it really does start at the top with Google. It's not just a skunkworks thing that happens here and there. And they have their Project X organization, which obviously is a major focal point. But I think they're the first ones to say that they encourage innovation throughout the organization. It's not something that's just relegated to that, that single focus. And then the second thing, I think, which is a great learning from them, is how do you actually create a culture of innovation in the company. So it really is something that's fostered. We use the term fail fast today and that type of thing, but I think some of their orientation is that they reward the quality of the experiment, not just the quality of the outcome of the experiment, and really encourage people to experiment and to fail, and failure is rewarded there. And I think the other thing that's nice is, kind of the physical environment of Google is about innovation. And they've studied, when do people innovate? What's the most innovative time? And there's a reason they have so many showers on the Google campus, and so many physical areas to go out and play and things like that. Obviously, there's another set of reasons for that, but part of it is to kind of create that environment where people can be creative. So Capgemini is not setting up showers, in 130 countries around the world, but we are trying to tap into that because we do see the value and the impact it's had.
I'll just comment on what Marissa is trying to get done at Yahoo. The best product groups that I've worked with in my career all talk about when you're trying to drive not just incremental change, but evolutionary or revolutionary change, and you're really trying to reboot an organization, having all the principals together in a room where they can feed off each other, they can feel the energy, there's just no substitute for that. And I think once you get that momentum going, it becomes like a flywheel, and I think then you can perhaps back off and have a more distributed environment. But I think she's absolutely doing the right thing. When you are trying to breathe life back into something and reboot it, I think it was a very reasonable approach.
I used to joke that I don't think Mr. Meyer had so much of an issue with employees working from home as employees not working from home. I think when she kind of came into it, there were a lot of people that were collecting paychecks, and so I don't blame her. But building on what Lanny and Jason were saying, I agree, leadership plays a huge role in shaping the culture. And a thing I'd observe about, almost all these new companies, Google, Yahoo, Box, like Jive, take your pick, that's different from companies I see that were built in a different time, is they're becoming pretty big, but they meet weekly, like the whole company, like up in front, ask any question. And at Google, like, it really is ask any question type of thing. They can't always answer, right? Yeah. But that really does a lot, I think, for making the culture feel like they're connected to the mission and what's going on, and that their opinion's valued, and that they're important enough to be in the loop, as opposed to what many of us are familiar with from other companies, where it's sort of like, post-earnings call, we're going to pull everybody together and tell you what we just told the entire world. And you're like, I could have listened to the earnings call, right? I mean, thanks for keeping me in the loop. And so if that's really the way you're connected to your company, it's hard to feel like your idea would really be valued outside of the small domain you might be in. And so I think that plays into the culture a lot.
Yeah, I've also seen some recent examples from trying to do a startup culture series for VentureBeat. One of them was Zappos. They have their CEO and other C-level execs serve lunch every 2 weeks to employees, so that if you have an idea, you can directly pitch them as they're scooping you mashed potatoes. And the other, which I thought was brilliant, Twilio, they have a lot of engineers at the company, very talented, but they have their engineers teach marketers and other kind of business roles in the company. They teach them to code. So there's that culture of collaboration, and it inspires a lot of teamwork. Do you have any other kind of quirky examples to share of things that you like to do at the company that no one else is doing?
We do something very similar to what you described at Zappos, in that every 2 weeks I have a breakfast and a lunch series with a cross-functional group of employees at the company, and I think it helps me better run the company and better understand what the issues are, removing all of the different layers of management, and just having a direct, high-fidelity conversation with employees. And it is where I get some of my best ideas about go-to-market, product, strategic objectives for the company. And I think there's no substitute, again, for that small forum of interaction.
I think in our case, I would say it's probably not a quirky enough example, but at the end of the day, I think it's a lot about engagement. I mean, how do you create an environment where leadership and employees really engage? And I think back to Chris's point, and also what Jason just alluded to, I think as a set of leaders, being out in the field with the people on a regular basis just has a lot to create that engagement experience. So whether it's out on in our case, out on a project site where our people spend most of their time, and being out there and creating opportunities to listen and engage, it really makes a major impact. It makes them feel like their voice is being heard and encourages them to come forward with ideas.
Yeah, and I guess building on that, I think the big thing that we try to do, and everybody seems to have different tactics, is like you want to create enough circumstances where you spend enough time with someone that you feel like they might tell you the truth, right? And I think we've all felt organizations have conspired against that ever happening, right? We speak what we feel like is safe, or we give feedback within a certain boundary, but you're not going to say something that's a fireable offense, and in some companies that bar is pretty low. And I think to your point, a lot of that is because you want to observe, like, are they really interested in my opinion, or do I get my head bit off the second I make a suggestion? And not to shamelessly plug a social platform, but we do have development in 5 different sites, and our executives do try to be pretty open and transparent with what they're saying, and there's Q&A, and there's still no substitute. We do a lot of things to try to physically mix, but I think that at the end of the day, all these things really are just trying to get to the fact that you guys are all working together to try to accomplish the same goal, and you're going to do your best job if everyone feels like they can speak their mind.
If I could just add one thing on, we focus very much on employees driving innovation. One other thing that comes to mind for me is we make a conscious decision at my company to reserve a significant amount of our engineering capacity to go to very specific customer requests. And customers as well as employees, customers are fantastic sources of innovation. And this is, I guess, a little bit of a shameless plug for Jive, but we use Jive to do that. We've got a big customer community. We have a big slug of engineering capacity that we use to make sure we have a high fidelity discussion with them around innovation and what we're building. And I think that's another great example of where innovation comes from.
Yeah, I was just going to actually ask about this idea of outsiders. So, what is maybe it's you bring in a consultant, like Eric Ries, for instance, is, of the lean startup movement, is very well known for coming into companies and trying to throw out some fresh ideas. But beyond consultants, another example is customers. Is there another, or can you talk more about the role of outsiders in coming into the company and blowing in some sort of fresh air and fresh approaches?
Well, I'd agree that I think a good idea can come anywhere, right? And often it is in the customer base or in partner ecosystem. And so I think, again, that's probably where you start. And then I think a lot of it is, what do you do once you have that good idea? Because I think most of us, you really become enslaved by your processes and the way you measure things and what you're doing. And you kind of have this good idea and you're running around and you just can't get anyone to change their behavior. And so that's where I think a lot of these other things we're talking about is like, how do you build a culture where people are willing to stop what they're doing for a second and say, you know what, that is a good idea. Like, who do we need to get together to change the way we work every day to do this? And to me, that's the much harder part than even like, where do you get the source of the inspiration? And I think often what Eric's doing when he comes in there, it's not even so much getting the ideas, it's breaking through the like, this is where ideas go to die, right? Like getting people to actually like do something about the idea, not just have the idea.
Yeah, you have 3 days, come back
exactly,
here,
right.
Show it to me. I want to see the prototype.
Yeah, one story that we like to tell internally is one of our clients, Burberry, which is I think now the 4th fastest growing brand in the world. When Angela Arendts went to that company, I mean, it was kind of an old British trench coat manufacturer that wasn't doing quite well. But one of the things she tapped into right away was how can she get engagement? Because she knew there was a lot of great people, a lot of new ideas, and a lot of young talent in that company. So she really put in more of a collaboration platform just to get people to start communicating, cross silos, that type of thing. And it was interesting because, you know, they were our client, we weren't helping them at all in that area, but we saw the impact of it. And we started to embrace those ideas and we took them back. So even though for years, you know, we had all these tools and capabilities to collaborate, it never really caught fire, but it was really observing what they did at Burberry as a client of ours. And that really stimulated it for us. And now that whole model has become, you know, almost part and parcel of how we operate as a company.
I'm fascinated to see what she's going to do at Apple.
At Apple, yeah.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Anything else to add on that one?
Okay, great. So we've touched on ideas that have worked. Anything that has just categorically failed. Anything that just did not work that you've tried.
I guess two things I would mention. I've been at companies before where they've tried to force innovation too much. You know, put parameters around it of coming up with X new products in, you know, a time frame. And as you were saying, you know, lock yourself in a room for 3 days and come back when you've got the next big thing. It just puts too much pressure on innovation. As we've been talking about on the panel, I think there are lots of great ways for innovation to happen organically, and you've got to kind of plant these seeds and foster it in the culture. Because companies that try too hard, it stifles it very quickly. The other thing I would say that's kind of a pivot off of this point is oftentimes the best innovation is hiding in plain sight. If you think about the devices that we use today or the things that have really made a difference in our life today, you know, just to pick on one of the obvious examples, Apple's products. Apple didn't invent really many of the products that they've become so famous for. They just made them better. And so oftentimes innovation isn't the next big idea. It's actually taking an idea out there and just making it better. And I think that companies, again, when they're trying to force innovation and force the next big thing, lose sight of that fact as well.
I totally agree with that. I think I do a lot of flying, as I'm sure many of you do, and so I finally got around to watching that Jobs movie. Not recommending it per se, but the interesting thing in there, like you do get an appreciation, as sensationalized as it may have been, between when you have a vision of what you want to do and what it will take to do it, and how you get so many people to kind of like stretch beyond what they want to do, and then all the pressures that will make you impatient for the outcome. And I think that's the biggest thing. Like when we fail, and when we have a lot of big ideas at Jive, it's often because we get impatient because it takes a very long time to do something really big. And I think organizationally, you get very hungry for solid milestones or something you can kind of like put in the bank, and some things just take a long time. And so I think that's one of the most challenging things, and why we often sit around, to your point, where everything's there and nobody kind of connects the dots, because it just takes a long time to get the right people to do the right things and be persistent and not give up and not kind of go back to the quarterly thing that, you know, you're good at.
Yeah, that's a good point. Doesn't happen overnight. On that note, we've got a little bit of time for a couple questions from the audience. I'm wondering if anyone else. Oh, here's one at the back.
Hi, this is Sanjeev Sao from CTO Trade Monster. One question I have is innovation has both sides, right? It's something cool and you want to do something innovative. It's a strategic differentiator, but it also comes with a lot of risk, right? And risk is an important lens through which you can judge innovation, because most of the business tend to avoid risk, and it's human psychology. The loss of and the fear of losing $100 is more intense than hope of gaining $150. So what are the things that you do to manage risk and change the culture within your stakeholders, board, and everybody that change this culture and risk management? So I'll be interested to hear about that.
Great question, thank you.
Yeah, it is a good question. I'll go first. I mean, I think of it as, I think of running a business similar to how you run your own personal finances. And in your personal finances, you have a portfolio of investments, some of which are capital preservation, some of which are high growth and risk. And depending on your tolerance for risk, all kinds of different factors, your portfolio is going to look one way or another. And certainly in my experience in companies I've been at, depending on the market dynamics and the stage of the company, we've thought about it a very similar way. Sometimes we've been heavily weighted towards risk. Sometimes it's been more capital preservation and focus on capturing the market. So So I think there's not one right answer, but I think you got to take a balanced portfolio approach to it and match that to what you're trying to accomplish with your company and your market.
And I would add to what Jason said and comment that again, I think it's what do you want out of innovation in your company? Do you want incremental change or you want exponential, radical kind of performance? And I think if it's the latter, then I think you've got to remove the operational constraints. You got to remove the KPIs, remove that. We got to have a business case first before we can innovate. We've got to have the risk profile before we can innovate. Let innovation happen. Just let it be out there. It's okay to fail, that type of thing. I think that's when you're going to really get the real radical kinds of ideas. And then, before you then move into, okay, can we commercialize the innovation? That's when you can start coming back and starting to put the other overlays on it. And, to Jason's point, does it make sense for your portfolio overall? But we find if we start with that and we put up here's all these gates your idea's got to pass, majority of people say, you know what, good, I'll keep my idea to myself, or I'll go somewhere else where it doesn't have those gates, right? Because again, that's what you want. You want the idea flow. And the more constraints you put in, I think you start to reduce it.
I guess I'll cap it off with, I think at the end, it does start and stop at the leadership level, right? I mean, I think you need an executive support, board level support, because sooner or later, if you're doing something big enough, somebody's going to come and challenge you on it and say, this is the worst thing the company's ever doing, and it's a massive failure, and it's going to be awful. And you need somebody who's going to stand up and say, we're doing it for these reasons, and I know we're spending a lot of money on it, and I know it's like 2 times over schedule, but we need to see this through. And if you don't have that level of support, you probably should not start something that big. You should stick to doing small things. You
got to make sure you have that one bright spark in the company who's going to say, this is crazy, we got to do it.
This seems silly, but it's like, it took us a while to get there. At DriveNow, we don't tackle big things if we can't get the executive team all, it's one of those where you kind of look around the table and you're just like, who's going to be the guy that's waiting to say, I told you so? Because if you're here, let's just not do it now, because it just saves us a lot of misery in the end, right? I mean, if we're going to do it, let's do it together and either fail together or win together. But there's a much higher chance of winning together if we're all actually paddling and no one's sitting there waiting for us to come to a dead stop.
Yep, we all need a Steve Jobs. One more question. We've got time for one more. Fantastic, thank you.
Hi, my name is Brett Giles with SiteWire. I was just wondering, as you involve more and more people in your company in the innovation process, if there's an expectation by those people for some form of compensation or incentive that you need to offer them that's beyond maybe just, hey, I came up with this wonderful idea and now my company's going to monetize it and capitalize on it.
Yeah, I think the lion's share of our employees, want the opportunity and feel like there's a culture where they can bring ideas and they'll be rewarded for it. More importantly, they won't be condemned for failing, for trying it. There's today less about financial rewards for it. And I think that's just the maturity of our organization and where we are. I think realistically, when we do start to really commercialize a big idea, then I think we got to think about that. But we've done many things where, if you submit an idea, you get a strawberry or you get, whatever, a little Waze object or something like that. That type of thing, which is fine and good. But I think just again, our maturity now is more at a point where I think people feel rewarded if we're in an environment that encourages ideas, doesn't criticize you or condemn you for failure, and they get visibility to the leadership of the company. So it's more the soft rewards right now. I'm assuming someday we'll move into something a little more sophisticated.
I guess I'll add, people, at least in our company, they like recognition. I mean, they like to be acknowledged that they had a great idea. The challenge we have often is that I think we've also come to appreciate if an idea is really going to be successful, it needs to transcend the "it was Chris's idea" category to more like this is the thing we're doing now. And so we try to make sure people get recognized early on, and they feel good about contributing ideas. But then we also try to move it into the it's Jive's idea now and not your idea anymore, because then it brings out sort of these controlling things that are not always the best behaviors.
Yeah, I would just add a couple things onto that, similar to what both Chris and Lanny said. I mean, we definitely have reward structures in place because both of these guys have said tone from the top is very important. So we have different innovation awards that we give out at the company, different compensation components that reward innovation. The other thing that we've done, and it might be an unfortunate reality of today's society, but also incenting our engineers to file patents. That is a process that most engineers hate. Spending time with lawyers, apologies to any lawyers if you're in the room, is not an engineer's idea of a great time, but it is a way to kind of pull some of those ideas out, and it's just become increasingly important for technology companies to have good patent portfolios as well.
Well, we managed to finish exactly on time. So, I believe there is a burger bar coming up. Speaking of innovation, there are 4 different options. So we're looking forward to that. And thank you so much for listening into our panel today. Hope you found it useful.